Awakening is not a distant, mysterious state that belongs only to those who sit in deep meditation for years on high mountains, nor is it a magical power that changes the physical world. It is simply the gentle returning of your mind to your body, a quiet shifting of your awareness from the cloudy dreams of the mind to the vivid reality of the present moment. When you begin to notice the warmth of the sun on your skin, the rhythmic sound of your own breath, and the way your feelings come and go like clouds in the sky, you are already stepping onto the path of waking up. In the ancient times of the Buddha, there was a very wealthy man named Yugra, who possessed everything a person could ever desire in terms of material comfort, beautiful houses, and high social standing. Yet, despite his vast wealth, his heart always felt completely empty, heavy with an unexplained sadness that followed him like a shadow through his luxurious halls. One afternoon, while walking through a quiet grove of trees, he happened to see the Buddha sitting calmly beneath a large canopy of leaves. The Buddha was not doing anything extraordinary, he was simply sitting in perfect stillness, breathing in and breathing out with total awareness and absolute peace. The mere sight of such deep serenity shook Yugra to his core, making him realize that all his gold could never buy even a single moment of that true, unshakable peace. He walked closer, bowing respectfully, and asked how a person could attain such profound calmness in a world so full of chaos. The Buddha looked at him with great compassion, smiling gently, and told him that true peace does not come from gathering things outside of oneself, but from waking up to the truth within. The Buddha explained that when we look at a tree, we must truly see the tree, when we listen to the wind, we must truly hear the wind, and when we experience sorrow, we must know that sorrow is there without letting it become our whole identity. This simple yet profound lesson completely transformed Yugra, who suddenly felt a heavy veil lifting from his mind, allowing him to experience the world with clarity for the very first time. This is the essence of awakening, which is the direct, unmediated experience of life as it unfolds, free from the constant judgments and stories created by our restless thoughts. When you start to experience this subtle shift in your own life, you will notice certain signs that clearly show your mind is beginning to wake up from its long slumber. One of the most beautiful signs is a deep, natural appreciation for the present moment, accompanied by a significant drop in the need to constantly judge everything and everyone around you. In the past, your mind might have been extremely busy labeling things as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, constantly wishing for things to be different than they actually are. You might have found yourself getting easily frustrated by a long line at the market, or feeling deeply annoyed by a sudden change in the weather. But as awakening blossoms within you, a soft acceptance begins to fill your heart, allowing you to see things exactly as they are without the urgent need to fix or change them. You begin to understand that a rainy day is just a rainy day, it is not a personal attack on your plans, it is simply nature doing what nature does. This release of judgment brings an incredible sense of freedom, because you no longer waste your precious energy fighting against the natural flow of reality. You become like a clear mirror, which reflects the beautiful flowers as beautiful flowers and the dark clouds as dark clouds, without holding on to any of them, remaining completely unstained and pure. There is a wonderful story from the ancient scriptures about a young monk named Anuruddha, who was known for his incredible dedication to learning the teachings, yet he struggled constantly with great restlessness. Every time he sat down to practice mindfulness, his mind would race to 1,000 different places, remembering past conversations, planning future journeys, and analyzing complex philosophical concepts. He felt deeply frustrated, believing that he was failing because his mind refused to become quiet and still. Seeing his struggle, an elder teacher walked up to him one evening, holding a small, delicate earthen lamp filled with oil. The teacher asked Anuruddha to carry the lamp across a courtyard without spilling a single drop of oil, while a group of musicians played lively music nearby. Anuruddha focused all his attention on the brim of the lamp, walking with slow, deliberate steps, completely aware of his posture, his balance, and the movement of his feet. When he reached the other side, the teacher asked him what kind of music the musicians had been playing, and Anuruddha replied that he had not heard a single note because his entire being was focused on the lamp. The teacher smiled warmly, telling him that mindfulness is exactly like carrying that lamp. It is the gentle, undivided focus on the immediate task at hand. When you are fully present with whatever you are doing, whether you are walking, sweeping the floor, or listening to a friend, the restless noise of the world naturally fades away. Anuruddha understood the lesson completely, realizing that he did not need to fight his thoughts, he simply needed to bring his full attention back to the current moment. As this awareness grows deeper, you will also notice a profound change in the way you experience your emotions, especially the difficult ones like anger, fear, and sadness. Instead of getting swept away by a sudden wave of anger, losing your balance and saying words that cause pain to others, you begin to create a small, sacred space between the feeling and your reaction. You become capable of looking at your anger with soft curiosity, observing it as a physical sensation in your body, noticing how it makes your chest tight and your breath short. You do not try to suppress the anger, nor do you feed it with more angry thoughts, you simply acknowledge its presence by telling yourself that anger is currently arising within you. This simple act of observing changes everything, because you are no longer the anger itself, you are the vast, spacious awareness that sees the anger. It is like standing safely on the shore, watching a wild wave rise and fall in the ocean, instead of drowning in the rough water. You realize that all emotions are impermanent, they are merely passing weather patterns in the grand sky of your consciousness. They come, they stay for a little while, and then they naturally dissolve away if we do not hold on to them with our grasping thoughts. This beautiful shift in perspective is perfectly illustrated by the journey of an ancient lay disciple named Anathapindika, who was a deeply generous man but often suffered from immense anxiety regarding his vast business responsibilities. He worried constantly about the safety of his merchant ships, the honesty of his workers, and the fluctuating values of his goods, which made his nights sleepless and his days exhausting. One morning, he came to visit the community of practitioners, his face pale and his eyes showing great weariness from his heavy worries. A wise elder noticed his distress and invited him to sit quietly near a calm pond where many beautiful lotus flowers were growing. The elder pointed to a lotus leaf, upon which a large drop of morning dew was resting, shining brightly like a diamond in the early sunlight. A gentle breeze blew through the garden, causing the leaf to tilt, and the drop of water rolled off smoothly, leaving the leaf completely dry and untouched. The elder looked at Anathapindika and said that our mind should be exactly like that lotus leaf, allowing the responsibilities, joys, and worries of the world to pass through without letting them stick to our hearts. Anathapindika took a deep breath, feeling a sudden wave of relief wash over him as he realized that he could still manage his business diligently without letting the anxiety consume his inner peace. He learned to observe his worries just like the morning dew, letting them roll away naturally, preserving the quiet sanctuary of his soul. Another profound sign of your awakening is the natural softening of your ego, which manifests as a beautiful decline in the need to always be right or to defend your self-image. Before this awakening, you might have felt a strong urge to win every argument, to prove your intelligence to others, and to feel deeply offended whenever someone criticized your actions. This constant defense of the ego is incredibly tiring, because it requires you to build thick walls around your heart, viewing the world as a place of constant competition. But as you wake up, you realize that the ego is just a collection of thoughts, memories, and labels that do not define your true essence. You become comfortable with not knowing everything, you find joy in listening to different perspectives, and you no longer feel diminished when someone points out a mistake you made. You understand that true strength lies not in being rigid like a stone wall, but in being flexible and yielding like water, which flows effortlessly around obstacles. This brings a wonderful lightness to your daily interactions, allowing you to connect with people on a level of genuine heart-to-heart understanding, free from the heavy armor of pride. Think of the beautiful example of Upali, who belonged to the lowest social class in ancient society, working as a humble barber for the royal princes of Kapilavastu. He lived in a world where he was constantly looked down upon, treated as someone of no value, which made him feel deeply insecure and fearful of everyone around him. When the royal princes decided to leave their luxurious lives to follow the path of mindfulness, Upali decided to join them, but he was filled with great terror, thinking he would be rejected due to his low birth. However, when they arrived at the monastery, the Buddha insisted on ordaining Upali first, which meant that according to tradition, the royal princes had to bow down to him as their senior brother. Upali was completely stunned as he watched the proud princes bow their heads to the ground before him, their faces filled with genuine humility and respect. In that incredible moment, all the rigid barriers of social class, pride, and ego completely dissolved into nothingness, leaving only a pure space of mutual reverence and brotherhood. Upali realized that beneath the superficial labels of prince and barber, they were all simply human beings seeking freedom from suffering. His old fears melted away, replaced by a radiant confidence and a deep, boundless love for all living beings, showing that when the ego falls away, our true nature shines brightly. As your heart continues to open through the process of awakening, you will find yourself experiencing a deep, uncaused joy that comes from within, completely independent of external circumstances. Most people spend their entire lives chasing happiness, believing that it can be found in a better job, a larger house, a perfect relationship, or a specific amount of money. This kind of happiness is always fragile, because it depends entirely on things outside of our control, leaving us constantly anxious about losing what we have gathered. The joy of awakening, however, is entirely different. It is the simple, unconditional joy of being alive, the quiet happiness that arises when the mind becomes still and content. You feel joyful simply because you can breathe, because you can walk on the beautiful earth, because you can look up at the vast blue sky. It is a peaceful, steady happiness that does not require anything to happen. It is always there, waiting for you in the quiet depths of your own present moment awareness. Even when you face difficulties or losses, this inner joy remains like a deep undercurrent in the ocean, keeping you grounded and resilient through all the storms of life. There was an inspiring practitioner named Mahakassapa, who chose to live a very simple life, dwelling in the wild forests, wearing robes made of discarded rags, and sleeping under the open sky. One day, a visitor from a wealthy city came to see him, feeling deep pity for the old man who possessed absolutely nothing and lived in such harsh conditions. The visitor asked how he could possibly find any happiness living like an animal in the wilderness, without the comforts of a warm home and good food. Mahakassapa smiled with eyes full of bright, radiant joy, and explained that he was richer than the wealthiest king, because he had no desires left to torture his mind. He told the visitor that while the king lived in constant fear of losing his kingdom, he himself found absolute delight in the rustling of the leaves, the bright moonlight filtering through the branches, and the profound stillness of the night. He did not need anything from the world to make him happy, because his mind was completely fulfilled within itself, demonstrating that true wealth is a heart free from wanting. This brings us to another beautiful sign of awakening, which is the arising of a boundless, natural compassion for all living beings, without any boundaries or limitations. When you look at the world through the eyes of awareness, you begin to see that everyone is struggling with their own hidden pains, their own fears, and their own deep confusion. You realize that when people act with anger, greed, or cruelty, they are not inherently evil, they are simply acting out of their own deep suffering and lack of understanding. This deep realization completely changes the way you view those who hurt you, replacing your anger with a soft, gentle compassion that wishes for their healing. You no longer want to punish them, you simply want them to be free from the ignorance that causes them to suffer and make others suffer. Your heart expands to encompass not just your family and friends, but the strangers you pass on the street, the animals, the insects, and the entire natural world. You feel a profound interconnectedness with all life, understanding that we are all leaves on the same great tree of existence, and that hurting another is truly hurting yourself. We can see this beautiful truth in the transformation of a woman named Vasavadatta, who was renowned for her extraordinary beauty and lived a life of great luxury, surrounded by admirers who praised her daily. She was incredibly proud of her appearance, using her charm to manipulate others, completely indifferent to the feelings of those around her. However, a sudden and terrible illness struck her, destroying her physical beauty completely, leaving her body covered in painful sores, causing all her fair-weather friends to abandon her in horror. She was cast out of her beautiful home, left to lie alone in a dark, dirty corner of a public park, weeping bitterly in her immense physical and emotional agony. While she lay there waiting for death, a compassionate practitioner named Upagupta happened to walk by, and instead of turning away in disgust, he knelt down beside her with deep tenderness. He gently washed her wounds, cooled her feverish brow with water, and spoke to her with words of profound comfort and absolute respect. Vasavadatta wept, asking why he showed such kindness to someone who was so ugly and abandoned by everyone else. Upagupta replied that her outer beauty was only a temporary mask, but her true inner nature was pure, beautiful, and completely worthy of love and care. His selfless compassion completely healed her broken spirit, allowing her to let go of her old vanity and experience a deep, spiritual awakening that filled her final days with absolute peace. When you live with this kind of awareness, your relationship with time undergoes a complete and wonderful transformation, releasing you from the heavy burden of the past and the future. You begin to see clearly that the past is nothing more than a memory trace in your mind, it has no real existence in the present moment, and it can never be changed. Similarly, you realize that the future is just an imaginary projection, a collection of hopes and fears about events that have not yet happened, and may never happen at all. The only reality that ever exists, the only place where you can actually live, breathe, love, and experience joy, is right here and right now. When you fully understand this truth, you stop dwelling on old mistakes, you stop replaying past arguments, and you stop worrying about what might happen tomorrow. You throw yourself completely into the present moment, treating each breath, each step, and each conversation as a precious, irreplaceable gift. This frees up an enormous amount of mental energy, allowing you to live with absolute vitality, creativity, and a deep sense of presence that touches everyone you meet. Consider the inspiring life of a simple woodcutter named Chunda, who worked hard every single day from morning until night, carrying heavy bundles of wood from the forest to the village market. He earned barely enough to buy food for his small family, yet his face always carried a bright, peaceful smile that puzzled all the other villagers. One day, a curious merchant asked him how he could remain so happy and content when his life was so filled with hard, repetitive labor and poverty. Chunda replied that when he chops wood, he does nothing but chop wood, feeling the weight of the axe, the texture of the bark, and the scent of the fresh pine. When he walks to the market, he does nothing but walk, enjoying the feel of the earth under his feet and the sight of the birds flying above. He explained that he does not carry the weight of yesterday's fatigue, nor does he worry about tomorrow's poverty, he simply lives completely in the current action. The merchant was deeply moved, realizing that the humble woodcutter had mastered the highest art of living, which is to be fully alive in the only moment that ever matters. As your mind becomes more awakened, you will also develop a profound sense of inner stability, an unwavering calmness that remains unshaken even when the world around you is in complete turmoil. This stability is not a cold, emotional numbness, but a deep, rooted presence, like a magnificent mountain that stands firm through all changing seasons. In the spring, the mountain is covered in beautiful flowers and singing birds, in the autumn, it is showered with falling leaves, and in the winter, it is wrapped in cold snow and fierce winds. Yet through all these dramatic changes, the mountain remains exactly as it is, stable, silent, and completely unmoved by the passing weather. When you are awakened, you allow the pleasant and unpleasant events of life to come and go, without letting them disturb the deep ocean of peace within your soul. You understand that praise and blame, gain and loss, success and failure are all temporary conditions that do not touch your true essence. This inner stability allows you to be a source of great strength and comfort for others, a calm harbor where people can find shelter when their own lives are tossed about by the stormy seas of circumstance. This unyielding stability was beautifully demonstrated by a wise elder named Sariputta, who was once walking through a crowded marketplace when a deeply bitter man rushed up and struck him hard from behind. The blow was powerful enough to cause great physical pain, yet Sariputta did not even turn around with anger. He simply continued walking with his usual calm, measured steps. The man was completely astonished, running in front of Sariputta, asking with confusion why he did not strike back or show any sign of anger or resentment. Sariputta looked at him with soft, gentle eyes and asked if he had hurt his hand when he delivered the blow, showing genuine concern for the man's well-being. The man burst into tears of deep repentance, falling to his knees, begging for forgiveness for his foolish and cruel action. Sariputta gently helped him rise, explaining that the blow had only touched his physical body, but it could never penetrate his mind, which was already free from the concepts of anger and revenge. This incredible display of inner peace completely transformed the aggressive man, who learned that true power belongs not to the one who can inflict pain, but to the one whose peace cannot be shaken by any external force. Another wonderful sign of awakening is the natural clarity of your speech, which becomes simple, honest, and filled with deep kindness and absolute sincerity. When your mind is crowded with restless thoughts, your speech often becomes chaotic, defensive, or used as a tool to impress others, often leading to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. But as you wake up, you begin to speak only when your words can bring peace, comfort, or genuine understanding to a situation. You find yourself listening deeply to others, not just waiting for your turn to speak, but truly hearing their words, their tone, and the unexpressed feelings behind their speech. Your words become a healing balm, offering soft encouragement to those who are down, gentle guidance to those who are confused, and a warm presence to those who feel lonely. You no longer participate in gossip, harsh criticism, or divisive speech, because you understand that words have an incredible power to either build bridges of love or create walls of deep division. Think of the beautiful story of a young man named Subhuti, who had a fierce, uncontrollable temper in his youth, often shouting at his parents and arguing violently with his neighbors over the smallest matters. His harsh words caused immense heartbreak to his family, leaving him feeling deeply isolated, lonely, and burdened by a constant sense of guilt. One day, he listened to a discourse on the beauty of gentle speech, which touched his heart so deeply that he resolved to change his ways completely. He went into the quiet forest, practicing mindfulness of his breath and learning to catch his angry impulses before they could reach his lips. Over many months of patient practice, his heart softened completely, and when he returned to his village, his speech had become so incredibly gentle, sweet, and comforting that people felt an immediate sense of peace just by being near him. Even the wild animals of the forest would come and sit quietly by his side when he spoke, drawn by the pure, harmless energy of his words. Subhuti became known as the foremost practitioner of loving kindness, showing that even the most troubled heart can transform its speech into a beautiful instrument of peace and healing. As the process of awakening matures within you, you will also notice a profound simplification of your life, a natural letting go of the unnecessary baggage that you used to carry. You realize that a truly rich life does not require a constant accumulation of material possessions, social titles, or endless superficial activities that leave you feeling drained. You begin to appreciate the beauty of simplicity, finding immense fulfillment in a clean, quiet space, a simple meal eaten with awareness, and meaningful time spent in nature. You naturally lose interest in the constant race for social status and the endless consumption of material goods, choosing instead to invest your time in things that nourish your soul. This simplification is not a form of forced self-denial, it is a joyful liberation, a realization that the less you need from the world, the more truly free you are. You become light like a bird, capable of flying high into the sky of freedom, because you are no longer weighed down by the heavy chains of endless desires. This beautiful simplicity is perfectly reflected in the story of an elder named Badia, who had been a high-ranking governor before choosing the path of renunciation and mindfulness. In his past life, he lived in a magnificent palace, guarded by soldiers, yet he was always terrified of assassins, thieves, and political rivals, keeping him awake all night with intense anxiety. After leaving his wealth behind, he lived under the shade of a simple tree in the forest, possessing nothing but a single bowl and 3 simple robes. One night, while sitting under the bright stars, Badia suddenly shouted out with absolute joy, exclaiming how truly happy he was. Another practitioner heard him and asked why he shouted, wondering if he was missing his old life of luxury and power. Badia laughed heartily and explained that in the past, despite his walls and guards, his heart was a dark prison of fear, but now, with nothing but the earth beneath him, he felt completely safe, free, and boundlessly happy. He realized that true security comes not from protecting your wealth, but from having absolutely nothing to lose, which is the ultimate freedom of a simple, awakened heart. When your heart is awakened, you also develop a deep, beautiful capacity for forgiveness, a willingness to release the old hurts and resentments that have kept your spirit bound for so long. You understand that holding on to a grudge is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It only destroys your own inner peace and keeps you tied to the past. Through the clear eyes of awareness, you see that the person who hurt you is acting out of their own deep blindness, confusion, and unresolved pain. This understanding does not mean you approve of their harmful actions, but it allows you to let go of the heavy burden of anger and hatred, choosing to free yourself from the cycle of pain. You forgive them not because they necessarily deserve it, but because your own heart deserves peace, because you refuse to let past injuries dictate your current happiness. This act of forgiveness is a profound gift of love to yourself, an opening of the cage doors so that your spirit can finally soar free. We can see the majestic power of forgiveness in the historical encounter between the Buddha and a fierce, misguided man named Angulimala, who had terrorized the entire countryside, killing many people due to a false teaching he had received. He wore a grim necklace made of the fingers of his victims, and everyone fled in absolute terror at the mere mention of his name, leaving the roads completely deserted. One afternoon, despite the warnings of the villagers, the Buddha walked calmly down the lonely path where Angulimala was known to hide, his step steady and his mind filled with boundless compassion. Angulimala saw him and rushed out with a sharp sword, shouting at the top of his voice for the Buddha to stop walking. The Buddha continued to walk with absolute calmness, replying softly that he had already stopped long ago, and it was Angulimala who needed to stop his violence. The incredible power of those gentle words, spoken without a single trace of fear or anger, pierced through Angulimala's thick armor of hatred, causing him to drop his sword and weep in deep remorse. The Buddha did not condemn him, did not punish him, but instead accepted him into the community with open arms, offering him a path of redemption and total inner transformation. Angulimala became a deeply peaceful practitioner, dedicating the rest of his life to healing and helping others, proving that even the darkest heart can be completely washed clean by the infinite ocean of forgiveness and love. As you continue to walk this path of awakening, your daily life becomes a beautiful, continuous meditation, where every action, no matter how small, is infused with the light of awareness. You no longer separate your life into spiritual moments when you sit quietly and ordinary moments when you are working, cooking, or cleaning. You realize that everything you do can be an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to stay present, and to express your deep love for life. When you prepare a meal, you do it with love and full attention, appreciating the colors, the textures, and the wonderful effort of the farmers who grew the food. When you speak to a stranger, you give them your whole presence, listening with an open heart, making them feel truly seen and valued. This integrated way of living brings a beautiful harmony to your existence, transforming your ordinary days into a sacred journey of continuous discovery and profound peace. Consider the inspiring example of an ancient laywoman named Madhuramata, who was a busy mother of many children, managing a large household with endless chores and responsibilities every single day. She did not have the time to sit for long hours in quiet contemplation or attend distant retreats, yet her face always radiated a deep, unearthly peace that amazed everyone who met her. When asked about her secret, she explained that she treated her home as her sacred monastery, and her daily chores as her spiritual practice. When she washed the clothes of her children, she felt she was washing away the impurities of greed and anger from her own heart, and when she swept the floor, she felt she was clearing away the dust of confusion from her mind. She cooked every meal with a heart full of pure, selfless love, wishing for the health and happiness of all those who would eat it. Through this beautiful approach, her entire domestic life became a radiant expression of Dharma, proving that awakening is not about escaping your ordinary life, but about bringing your full, loving presence into everything you do. This brings us to a beautiful understanding of the nature of the mind, which is often compared to a turbulent river that can become completely clear and still if we simply stop disturbing it. When you are asleep to the present moment, your mind is constantly churned up by the heavy winds of desire, aversion, and endless delusions, making it impossible to see the truth clearly. But as you learn to step back and observe the movements of your mind without getting involved, the muddy waters naturally begin to settle on their own. You start to see the beautiful, pristine nature of your underlying consciousness, which is inherently pure, peaceful, and full of radiant clarity. You realize that you do not need to create peace, you do not need to construct happiness, you simply need to clear away the artificial debris of overthinking to reveal the natural joy that has always been there. There was a profound practitioner named Sona, who came from a very wealthy family and practiced mindfulness with such extreme, intense effort that his feet began to bleed from his relentless walking meditation. Despite his intense exertion, his mind remained deeply agitated, frustrated, and completely far away from the peace he so desperately sought. Seeing his painful struggle, the Buddha visited him and asked him a simple question about the musical lute that Sona used to play beautifully when he was a layman. The Buddha asked if the lute would sound beautiful if the strings were wound too tight, and Sona replied that the strings would snap and produce a harsh, unpleasant sound. The Buddha then asked if the lute would sound good if the strings were too loose, and Sona said it would be completely silent, unable to produce any music at all. The Buddha smiled and told him that spiritual practice is exactly the same. If you strain too hard, your mind becomes restless and tense, and if you are too lazy, your mind sinks into sleep and dullness. He advised Sona to tune his effort gently, to find the beautiful middle path of relaxed awareness, neither forcing nor neglecting the practice. Sona followed this wise advice, letting go of his intense anxiety for results, and his mind naturally became calm and clear, allowing him to experience the sweet fruit of true awakening. As your awareness deepens, you will also experience a beautiful dissolution of the fear of death, which is replaced by a deep, comforting understanding of the continuous flow of life. Most people live with a subtle, underlying terror of non-existence, which makes them grasp tightly to their bodies, their identities, and their possessions, creating immense suffering. But as you wake up to your true nature, you see that you are not just this physical form, which is bound to age and dissolve, but you are the very awareness that experiences the form. You look at nature and see how a cloud never truly dies, it simply transforms into a beautiful rain that nourishes the earth, flows into the rivers, and rises back into the sky as vapor. You realize that your life is a beautiful, eternal dance of transformation, and that what we call death is merely a change of garment, a transition into another form of existence. This deep insight removes the ultimate fear from your heart, allowing you to live with a glorious, fearless freedom, embracing every moment of life with an open and joyful spirit. Think of the beautiful story of Kisa Gautami, who experienced the deepest, most agonizing sorrow when her young child suddenly fell ill and passed away. Unable to accept the painful reality, she carried the lifeless body of her child through the village, begging everyone for a medicine that could bring him back to life. The villagers looked at her with deep pity, thinking she had lost her mind to grief, until a wise old man advised her to seek the help of the great physician of the soul. She ran to the Buddha, weeping bitterly, imploring him to cure her child, and the Buddha looked at her with infinite love and told her that he could indeed prepare a medicine. He instructed her to bring him a handful of mustard seeds, but with one absolute condition: the seeds must come from a house where no one had ever lost a parent, a spouse, a child, or a friend. Filled with a glimmer of hope, Kisa Gautami went from door to door throughout the entire town, asking for the mustard seeds. At every single house, the people were willing to give her the seeds, but when she asked the vital question, they always replied with deep sadness that the living are few, but the dead are many. One family told her of how their father had passed away last year, another spoke of the loss of their daughter, and another recalled the death of a beloved servant. As she walked from house to house through the long day, a profound realization began to dawn in her heart. She saw that she was not alone in her grief, and that death is a natural, universal truth that touches every single living being. Her intense, personal attachment dissolved into a vast, shared compassion for all humanity, and she gently laid her child down in the quiet forest, returning to the Buddha with a calm, peaceful mind. She chose to dedicate her life to mindfulness, finding the deathless peace within her own awakened consciousness, showing us that when we accept the true nature of reality, our suffering dissolves into profound wisdom. When you live from this place of deep awakening, your presence itself becomes a silent blessing to everyone around you, changing the atmosphere of a room simply by walking into it. You do not need to speak long words, you do not need to preach or convince anyone of anything, because your calm, radiant energy speaks directly to their hearts. People who are feeling anxious or stressed will naturally feel a sense of calm when they sit near you, because your stillness acts like an anchor for their own restless minds. Your soft, non-judgmental listening allows them to drop their heavy armor, feel safe, and connect with their own inner clarity. You become a living example of peace, showing the world that it is truly possible to live in this chaotic world with a heart that is completely light, loving, and free. There was a beautiful practitioner named Upasika Ki Nanayan, who lived a simple life in a quiet valley, spending her days in silent awareness and writing short, profound verses about the nature of the mind. She never sought fame, never traveled to large cities to give discourses, yet seekers from all over the country began to travel long distances just to sit near her humble dwelling. They found that just watching her sweep her small porch with absolute presence, or seeing the way she poured water into a bowl with total care, brought a deep silence to their own troubled minds. Her entire life was a seamless poem of mindfulness, a beautiful proof that a single person who is truly awake can become a radiant lighthouse, guiding countless souls through the stormy night to the safe harbor of true peace. As the beautiful morning sun rises higher into the sky, casting away the remaining shadows of the night, the world around us becomes fully visible in its true, vibrant colors. This gentle transition in nature is exactly like the process of your inner awakening, where the bright light of clear awareness gradually illuminates the hidden corners of your mind, revealing things as they truly are. When you walk this path, you begin to experience a beautiful sense of space within your own thoughts, a quiet realization that you are not the constant noise inside your head, but the silent witness who hears it. This insight brings a profound relief, because you no longer feel the need to chase after every pleasant thought, or fight against every uncomfortable memory that surfaces in your mind. You learn to let your thoughts arise and pass away just like the white clouds drifting across the wide blue sky, leaving the vast expanse of your consciousness completely pure, open, and untouched. In the beautiful days when the Buddha walked the earth, there was a young man named Bodhi, who was born into a family of traditional weavers, spending his days spinning fine threads into beautiful fabrics. He was a person of great intelligence, but he possessed a very sensitive heart, which made him easily overwhelmed by the constant worries of daily life, the fear of poverty, and the opinions of his neighbors. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at his loom, he sat beneath a large banyan tree at the edge of his village, watching the river flow smoothly past him. As he sat there, he noticed how the water carried away dry leaves, small twigs, and pieces of foam, without holding on to any of them, remaining perfectly clear and fluid. In that moment of quiet observation, Bodhi felt a deep shift within himself, realizing that his mind was exactly like that flowing river, and his thoughts were merely the passing leaves and foam. He understood that he did not need to stop the thoughts from coming, he simply needed to stop grabbing them, allowing them to float away down the river of time. This simple realization brought an immediate, profound peace to his heart, and from that day forward, his face carried a gentle radiance that inspired everyone who saw him work at his loom. This is the beautiful nature of awakening. It does not mean your mind becomes a blank void, it means you become the wide, spacious river rather than the fragile leaves that float upon its surface. When you live with this beautiful clarity, another clear sign of your awakening will manifest as a natural, effortless release of the desire to control other people and external events. In the past, you might have spent an enormous amount of mental energy trying to arrange the world according to your personal preferences, wishing your loved ones would act differently, or expecting your career to follow a perfect, predetermined path. This constant striving for control is incredibly exhausting, because the universe is infinitely vast and complex, constantly changing in ways that no single human being can ever predict. But as your mind wakes up, you begin to see the beauty of allowing life to unfold in its own perfect timing, trusting the natural wisdom of the universe. You stop forcing things to happen, you stop manipulating situations for your own comfort, and instead, you learn to dance with the rhythm of reality as it presents itself. This shift from control to deep trust brings a wonderful sense of ease into your life, making you feel completely secure, relaxed, and at home in the universe, no more matter what circumstances you find yourself facing. There is an inspiring story from the ancient times about a master gardener named Sumana, who was responsible for maintaining the magnificent royal gardens of a great king. Sumana loved his work deeply, spending his days planting rare seeds, watering delicate shoots, and pruning the branches of the great trees with absolute devotion. One year, a severe and unexpected drought struck the kingdom, causing the beautiful ponds to dry up and many of his most precious flowers to wither away beneath the scorching sun. The king was furious and full of anxiety, but Sumana remained completely calm, continuing to care for the surviving plants with a gentle smile on his face. When the king asked how he could remain so peaceful while the beautiful garden was being destroyed, Sumana bowed respectfully and said that a gardener can only plant the seed, water the soil, and remove the weeds, but the rain and the sun belong to nature. He explained that getting angry at the drought would not bring a single drop of water, it would only burn his own inner peace, so he chose to accept the reality of the season and do his best with what remained. The king was deeply moved by the gardener's profound wisdom, realizing that true maturity is knowing what you can change and having the grace to accept what you cannot, which is a beautiful hallmark of an awakened soul. As this beautiful acceptance grows stronger within you, your relationship with your past will also undergo a deep, healing transformation, freeing you from the heavy chains of guilt and regret. Many people live their lives looking backward, constantly replaying old mistakes, wishing they had chosen a different path, or holding on to grievances against those who treated them unfairly. This constant dwelling on the past is a form of deep sleep, because it keeps your mind trapped in a world that no longer has any real existence, causing you to miss the beautiful opportunities of the present. When you wake up, you see clearly that every experience you went through, even the most painful and difficult ones, was a necessary step that brought you to this current moment of awareness. You look back at your younger self not with harsh judgment or anger, but with deep compassion, understanding that you did the best you could with the level of awareness you possessed at that time. You forgive yourself completely, and in doing so, you unlock the heavy door of your inner prison, stepping out into the fresh, crisp air of the present moment with a light and joyous heart. Think of the beautiful transformation of a woman named Pingla, who had spent many years of her life working as a dancer in a busy city, living a life focused entirely on pleasure, vanity, and material gain. As she grew older and her youth began to fade, she found herself filled with a deep, bitter regret, feeling that she had wasted her precious years on superficial things that left her empty and alone. She would sit in her small room for hours, weeping over her lost beauty and her past choices, her mind a dark storm of sorrow and self-blame. One evening, a gentle practitioner happened to rest near her doorstep, and hearing her weeping, he spoke to her through the open window with words of profound comfort. He told her that a lotus flower does not look back at the dark mud from which it grew, nor does it regret the time it spent beneath the murky water, it simply opens its beautiful petals to the morning sun. He explained that her past was just the mud, and her current desire for peace was the beautiful flower beginning to blossom, completely pure and untouched by the dirt below. These gentle words pierced through her despair like a beam of pure light, allowing Pingla to let go of her heavy regrets, embrace her life with a soft acceptance, and find a deep, beautiful peace that filled her remaining years with true meaning. Another wonderful sign of your awakening is a significant increase in your capacity for deep, unconditional listening, where you offer your full presence to others without any hidden agenda. In our busy world, when people converse, they are rarely truly present with each other. They are often busy thinking about what they will say next, or comparing the speaker's words with their own opinions. But as your mind becomes still, you develop the beautiful ability to put your own thoughts aside completely when someone is speaking to you, creating a spacious, loving silence where they can express themselves fully. You listen not just to the words coming out of their mouth, but to the feelings behind those words, the subtle tone of their voice, and the silent longings of their heart. This kind of listening is a profound act of love, a beautiful gift that allows the other person to feel deeply seen, heard, and understood, which often brings an immediate sense of healing to their soul. We can see this beautiful quality in the story of a wise elder named Nanda, who was known throughout the valley for his extraordinary ability to bring peace to troubled families. Two brothers in the village had been caught in a bitter feud for many years over the division of their father's land, speaking to each other only with words of harsh anger and fierce resentment. Many village elders had tried to mediate their dispute, offering complex legal solutions and moral advice, but every meeting ended in even greater hostility and frustration. Finally, the brothers agreed to visit Nanda, sitting before him with tense bodies and angry faces, ready to launch into their usual arguments. Nanda did not say a word, he simply sat with them, looking at each brother with eyes full of absolute warmth, compassion, and deep, silent respect. He invited them to speak one by one, and as they spoke, Nanda listened with such total, undivided attention that the brothers felt the heavy walls of their anger naturally beginning to soften. For the first time in years, as they explained their pain in that sacred space of pure listening, they began to hear their own suffering and the suffering of each other, realizing that their relationship was far more precious than any piece of earth. Without Nanda saying a single word of advice, the brothers turned to each other, tears flowing down their faces, and embraced in deep, genuine reconciliation, showing that pure, non-judgmental presence has the power to melt the hardest walls of human division. As your heart continues to wake up, you will also notice a beautiful shift in your definition of success, moving away from the competitive standards of society toward a deep, inner contentment. Before this awakening, you might have believed that success meant having a high position, a famous name, a beautiful appearance, or a massive amount of material wealth that others would admire. This constant pursuit of external validation is a never-ending race, because there will always be someone who has more, leaves you feeling permanently insecure, stressed, and dissatisfied with your life. But as you awaken, you realize that true success is simply a quiet mind, a heart that is free from hatred, and the ability to appreciate the simple joys of each passing moment. You feel completely successful when you can sleep peacefully at night, walk with a light heart during the day, and bring a smile to the face of a child or a lonely friend. This inner shift frees you from the heavy burden of competition, allowing you to live your life with absolute authenticity, doing what brings true joy to your soul rather than what pleases the expectations of the world. Consider the beautiful example of a scholar named Javaka, who spent his youth studying ancient texts, mastering complex philosophies, and winning prestigious debates in the royal courts of the land. He was celebrated by kings and praised by his peers, yet his heart was always restless, filled with a subtle, persistent anxiety about maintaining his high reputation and defending his intellectual titles. One day, while traveling through a remote forest, he met a simple practitioner who lived in a small straw hut, spending his time looking after wounded forest animals and meditating beneath the trees. Javaka tried to engage the practitioner in a deep, philosophical debate, quoting complex scriptures and raising difficult logical questions to prove his superior knowledge. The practitioner simply smiled warmly, offered Javaka a fresh cup of mountain water, and remarked on the beautiful song of a bird sitting on a nearby branch. Looking into the practitioner's eyes, which were completely clear, calm, and filled with a boundless, uncaused happiness, Javaka suddenly felt the immense weight of his own intellectual pride and vanity. He realized that all his vast knowledge was nothing compared to the simple, living peace of the practitioner, who had no titles to defend and no reputation to protect. Javaka bowed deeply, leaving his books behind, and chose to learn the simple art of being fully present, discovering that true wisdom is not about gathering information, but about emptying the mind of all unnecessary burdens. This brings us to another beautiful sign of awakening, which is the arising of a deep, intuitive understanding of the interconnected nature of all things in this vast universe. When you are asleep to the truth, you view yourself as an isolated fragment, a separate entity that must fight against the rest of the world for survival, happiness, and security. This false sense of separation is the root cause of all loneliness, fear, and selfishness, creating a constant state of inner tension and conflict. But as you awaken, you begin to see clearly that you are intimately connected to everything around you, just like a single wave is completely inseparable from the vast, deep ocean. You see that your breath is the very air that moves through the leaves of the great trees, your body is made of the same elements as the earth and the stars, and your happiness is beautifully intertwined with the happiness of all living beings. This profound insight dissolves your loneliness completely, replacing it with a deep, comforting sense of belonging, a realization that you are never truly alone because you are an integral part of the great, living fabric of existence. We can see this beautiful truth in a lovely incident involving an ancient female practitioner named Uthara, who worked as a gentle helper in a large, busy household in a rural village. One afternoon, while she was carrying a large wooden bowl filled with fresh milk across the courtyard, she stumbled over a stone, causing the bowl to break and the milk to spill completely onto the earth. The mistress of the house rushed out, shouting with anger, deeply upset by the loss of the milk and the broken bowl, her face twisted with resentment. Uthara did not get defensive, nor did she run away in fear, she simply knelt down on the ground, gently cleaning up the broken pieces with absolute care and a peaceful face. She looked up at her angry mistress with eyes full of deep, soft understanding, and said that the milk had returned to the earth which nourished the grass that fed the cows, so nothing was truly lost, it had simply changed its form. She explained that if they allowed anger to fill their hearts, that would be the only true loss, a destruction of the beautiful peace between them. The profound depth and calm clarity of her words completely disarmed the mistress, whose anger instantly melted away, replaced by a deep sense of wonder at the humble helper's wisdom. They stood together in the quiet courtyard, feeling a deep, shared connection to the earth beneath their feet, realizing that when we see the big picture of life, the small accidents of daily existence lose their power to disturb our hearts. Another wonderful sign of your awakening is a beautiful, natural balance in your physical energy, where your body feels light, relaxed, and deeply aligned with your mind. When your mind is filled with constant stress, anxiety, and unexpressed emotions, your body reflects this tension, manifest as tight shoulders, shallow breathing, and a chronic sense of exhaustion. But as your mind returns to the present moment, learning to let go of its heavy burdens, your physical body naturally relaxes, allowing your life force to flow smoothly and harmoniously through every cell. You become deeply attuned to the natural needs of your body, knowing exactly when to eat, when to rest, and when to move, without falling into the extremes of laziness or overexertion. Your breath becomes naturally deep, smooth, and rhythmic, acting as a constant, beautiful anchor that keeps your mind grounded in a state of absolute peace throughout the day. Think of the beautiful journey of a practitioner named Kula, who had spent many years working as a busy messenger for the royal army, constantly running from city to city carrying urgent documents. He was always in a state of intense hurry, his heart beating fast, his muscles permanently tight, and his mind constantly racing with the fear of being late. Even after he left his military life to practice mindfulness in a quiet monastery, his body carried this deep habit of tension, making him walk too fast and breathe with great difficulty. His teacher noticed his struggle and one morning, invited him to walk through a beautiful field of tall bamboo grass that grew near the riverbank. The teacher asked Kula to observe how the bamboo stalks moved when a strong wind blew through the valley, bending gracefully with absolute flexibility, never breaking, and returning to their perfect upright position as soon as the wind passed. The teacher explained that true physical and mental strength is exactly like the bamboo, it is the ability to be completely relaxed, yielding, and flexible, rather than rigid and tense. Kula took a deep, slow breath, letting his shoulders drop completely, and as he practiced walking with the graceful ease of the bamboo, his chronic exhaustion disappeared, replaced by a radiant, sustainable energy that made every step a pure joy. As your awareness continues to deepen, you will also notice a beautiful decline in your attachment to personal praise, recognition, and the need to be validated by the world. Before this awakening, your mood might have been heavily dependent on what others thought of you, feeling incredibly happy when praised and deeply depressed when criticized or ignored. This dependency is a form of emotional slavery, because it hands the remote control of your happiness over to the hands of fickle human opinions, which change like the shifting winds. But as you wake up, you discover a deep, immovable well of self-worth within your own being, a realization that your true value is inherent and can never be increased by praise or decreased by blame. You perform your actions simply because they are good, helpful, and aligned with your inner truth, without expecting anyone to notice, thank you, or applaud your efforts. This brings an immense freedom to your work and your relationships, allowing you to give your best to the world without any strings attached, completely satisfied within yourself. We can see this beautiful quality in the life of an ancient sculptor named Upavanna, who lived in a quiet village, carving beautiful statues of peaceful figures from large blocks of mountain stone. He worked with absolute devotion, spending months on a single piece, making sure every line and curve expressed a sense of deep serenity and boundless compassion. When a statue was completed, he would place it under a tree in the public park for everyone to enjoy, never signing his name or claiming any credit for his beautiful creation. A wealthy traveler once came to the village and was so struck by the extraordinary beauty of one of the statues that he offered a massive sum of gold to find the artist, wanting to bring him to the royal capital to gain fame and fortune. When the traveler found Upavanna in his simple workshop, covered in stone dust, and offered him the gold and fame, the old sculptor gently declined with a warm, peaceful smile. He told the traveler that the joy of carving the stone and the sight of children playing around the statue were already his perfect reward, and that he had no need for a famous name, which would only clutter his quiet life with unnecessary noise. Upavanna continued his simple work in total obscurity, his heart completely content, showing that when you are truly awake, the simple act of creating and giving is more than enough to satisfy your soul. Another profound sign of your awakening is a beautiful, natural clarity that arises in your decision-making process, replacing confusion and hesitation with deep, inner certainty. When your mind is crowded with conflicting desires, fears, and the opinions of others, even the smallest choices can become a source of immense stress and endless overthinking. You find yourself constantly weighing options, worrying about making the wrong move, and feeling paralyzed by the unpredictable consequences of the future. But as you wake up, your inner compass becomes perfectly clear, grounded in a deep understanding of what is truly important in life, which is peace, kindness, and absolute honesty. When a situation arises that requires a choice, you do not need to struggle through endless logical analysis. You simply look at the situation with a still, clear mind, and the right path reveals itself naturally. Your decisions become spontaneous, accurate, and completely aligned with the natural flow of life, bringing a sense of perfect harmony to your actions and their outcomes. Think of the beautiful story of a wise village elder named Soma, who was frequently called upon to resolve difficult disputes and guide the community through challenging times of crisis. One year, a severe locust plague destroyed most of the crops in the region, leaving the village with a very limited amount of grain to survive the long, cold winter ahead. The villagers were caught in a fierce, chaotic argument, some wanting to store all the grain for their own families, while others insisted on sharing it equally with a neighboring village that was also suffering deeply. The tension was immense, and everyone looked to Soma to make the final, crucial decision that would determine the fate of hundreds of people. Soma did not join the loud arguments. He spent a quiet evening sitting in deep, silent mindfulness beneath the stars, letting the noise of the world completely clear away from his mind. The next morning, he stepped before the anxious crowd and simply said that if they saved only themselves, they would live in constant fear of their neighbors, but if they shared what they had, they would all survive together in friendship and mutual support. The deep, absolute clarity and quiet confidence in his voice instantly cut through the villagers' panic, making them realize that cooperation was the only true path to survival. They followed his guidance, sharing their food generously, and not only did everyone survive the winter, but the bond between the two villages became so strong that they lived in perfect peace for generations, demonstrating that a decision made from a place of clear awareness always brings blessings to everyone involved. As you live from this beautiful place of deep clarity, you will also notice that your life becomes remarkably free from the burden of boredom, transforming even the most mundane routines into moments of deep fascination. Most people require a constant stream of external entertainment, sensory stimulation, and novel experiences to keep their minds engaged, easily falling into a state of dull restlessness when things become quiet. This chronic boredom is a sign that the mind is asleep, completely blind to the incredible miracle of life that is continuously unfolding in every single square inch of existence. But as you awaken, your senses become incredibly sharp, fresh, and fully alive, allowing you to discover an infinite world of wonder in the simplest things around you. You can look at a plain stone wall and feel deeply moved by the play of light and shadow upon its surface, or you can watch a tiny ant carrying a grain of sand and feel a profound reverence for the mystery of life. Every moment becomes a beautiful discovery, every sound a wonderful symphony, and every breath a glorious celebration of being, making it absolutely impossible to ever feel bored or empty again. Consider the inspiring life of a simple kitchen helper named Gopa, who spent her entire life working in the dark, hot kitchen of a large monastery, chopping vegetables, washing enormous pots, and cleaning the stone floors. She never traveled to beautiful cities, never read complex books, and never attended prestigious discourses, yet her face always carried a bright, childlike wonder that filled the entire kitchen with joy. A visiting practitioner once asked her how she could remain so enthusiastic and full of life while performing the same dull, heavy chores day after day, year after year. Gopa laughed with a sound like silver bells, and explained that she never chopped the same vegetable twice, because every carrot had a different shape, every leaf of cabbage had a unique pattern of veins, and every morning brought a completely different quality of light through the small kitchen window. She said that she felt like a guest at a magnificent, changing feast every single day, and that the simple act of washing a pot was a beautiful dance between her hands, the warm water, and the shining metal. The practitioner bowed deeply to the humble kitchen helper, realizing that she had achieved the highest state of mindfulness, which is to see the extraordinary beauty hidden within the ordinary moments of life. This brings us to another beautiful sign of awakening, which is the natural blossoming of a soft, effortless gratitude that fills your heart for absolutely everything you experience. When you are asleep, your mind is typically focused on what is missing in your life, constantly complaining about your discomforts, and taking your blessings completely for granted. But as you wake up, your eyes open to the incredible truth that every single breath you take is a beautiful gift, an unearned miracle provided by the vast universe. You feel a deep, spontaneous gratitude for the roof over your head, the clean water you drink, the clothes that keep you warm, and the presence of the people who walk along the path of life with you. Even when you encounter difficult challenges or painful losses, you can still feel a sense of gratitude for the profound lessons they teach you, helping your soul to grow stronger, wiser, and more deeply compassionate. This constant state of gratitude fills your life with an absolute richness, making you realize that you already possess everything you need to be completely happy, content, and at peace right now. We can see this beautiful quality in the journey of a young man named Yasas, who came from a family of wealthy landowners, living a life surrounded by extreme luxury, fine clothes, and endless entertainment. Despite his fortunate circumstances, he was a very unhappy person, constantly complaining about the quality of his food, the comfort of his bed, and the service of his helpers, his heart always bitter and dissatisfied. One day, a sudden fire destroyed his family's entire estate, leaving him with nothing but a single set of simple clothes and forcing him to walk to a distant village to seek shelter with a poor relative. Along the road, feeling deeply exhausted and hungry, a humble farmer noticed his distress and shared his meager lunch of coarse brown bread and fresh mountain water with him. As Yasas ate this simple bread beneath the shade of a wayside tree, he suddenly burst into tears, not of sorrow, but of a deep, overwhelming gratitude that he had never felt in his entire life of luxury. He realized that when he had everything, he appreciated nothing, but now, with nothing but a simple piece of bread given with genuine kindness, his heart was completely full and rich. This profound experience completely awakened his soul, turning him into a deeply humble and grateful person who spent the rest of his life sharing his joy and love with everyone he met, showing that true wealth is measured not by what you possess, but by the depth of gratitude in your heart. As you continue to walk this beautiful path, you will also notice a natural, effortless alignment with the ethical principles of life, which manifest as a total inability to cause harm to any living being. In the past, you might have required rigid rules, moral laws, or the fear of punishment to keep your behavior aligned with what is good and right, sometimes struggling against your own selfish impulses. But as you awaken to the deep truth of interconnectedness, causing harm to another human being, an animal, or the environment becomes completely unthinkable, because you feel their life as your own life. Your actions naturally become gentle, harmless, and filled with a spontaneous desire to protect, nurture, and support the well-being of everything around you. You do not need to try to be a good person, you simply become a natural instrument of the universal goodness, flowing through the world like a gentle, healing breeze that brings comfort and relief to every soul it touches. Think of the beautiful story of a reformed hunter named Samada, who had spent his youth setting clever traps and hunting wild animals in the deep forests to sell their meat in the village market. He was highly skilled at his trade, viewing the forest creatures merely as objects for his personal profit, completely indifferent to their fear and physical pain. One afternoon, while tracking a wounded deer through a dense thicket, he found the beautiful animal lying near a small stream, its eyes full of absolute terror as it watched his approach. As Samada raised his bow to deliver the final shot, he suddenly looked deeply into the deer's large, dark eyes, and in a flash of profound awakening, he saw his own desire for life and fear of death reflected right back at him. He realized with absolute clarity that the deer felt pain exactly as he did, loved its life exactly as he did, and desired to live in peace just like any human being. The bow slipped from his hands, falling into the stream, and he knelt beside the deer, gently dressing its wound with crushed leaves and speaking to it with words of deep, tearful apology. From that transformative day forward, Samatha never harmed another living creature. He became a devoted protector of the forest, using his deep knowledge of the wilderness to help lost travelers and rescue injured animals, showing that when the light of true awareness shines into the heart, our natural compassion instantly eliminates all tendencies towards violence and harm. When you live with this deep, harmless awareness, your face and your posture naturally begin to express a beautiful, effortless grace that reflects the profound peace within your soul. Your movements become slow, deliberate, and full of presence. Your voice carries a gentle, melodic quality that brings immediate comfort to those who hear you speak, and your eyes look at the world with a soft, steady warmth. You no longer walk through life with a tense, hurried posture. Your body becomes a beautiful reflection of your calm and spacious mind, moving through the world with absolute lightness and freedom. People will naturally find themselves drawn to your presence, feeling a sense of deep safety and peace just by being near you, even if you are simply sitting together in total silence without saying a single word. Consider the beautiful example of an elder named Malankiyaputta, who had spent his entire life in a state of intense intellectual restlessness, constantly worrying about abstract philosophical questions about the origin of the universe and the nature of the afterlife. He walked with a hunched posture, his brow permanently furrowed, and his eyes always darting around with confusion and agitation. After a profound conversation with a wise teacher who advised him to let go of all abstract speculations and simply focus on the immediate reality of his own breath and physical body, his mind became completely still and clear. Over the following months, a remarkable change took place in his physical appearance. His furrowed brow smoothed out completely, his posture became upright and majestic, and his steps grew as light and silent as a deer walking through a quiet forest. When he walked into the village to gather his simple meal, the people would stop their work just to watch him pass, deeply moved by the extraordinary grace and absolute peace that radiated from his every movement. He did not need to say a single word of philosophy. His transformed physical presence was already the most powerful sermon on the beauty of Dharma, proving that when the mind is fully awake, the body naturally becomes a beautiful temple of peace. As the gentle evening approaches, casting a beautiful golden glow across the vast landscape, the birds return to their nests in the great trees, and the entire world naturally slows down into a state of deep, quiet repose. This final transition of the day perfectly mirrors the beautiful maturity of your inner awakening, where the active, searching energy of your mind completely dissolves into a profound, immovable stillness that passes all human understanding. In this advanced stage of waking up, you no longer feel like a traveler walking along a difficult path toward a distant destination. You realize that you have always been at home, and that the peace you were so desperately searching for was actually the very nature of the awareness that was doing the searching. This ultimate realization brings an absolute, unshakable freedom to your soul, allowing you to live your remaining days on this beautiful earth with a heart that is completely light, open, and boundlessly loving, like the wide space that contains all the stars and galaxies. In those ancient, beautiful times when the light of wisdom walked upon the earth, there was a deeply devoted practitioner named Kamaka, who had spent many years practicing mindfulness with great sincerity, yet a subtle, persistent sense of separate identity still lingered in his mind like a thin veil of mist. He understood the teachings perfectly. He knew that his body, his feelings, and his thoughts were impermanent, yet he still felt a faint, underlying whisper that said, "I am experiencing this peace." He fell quite ill one winter, and while lying in his quiet hut, several wise elder brothers came to visit him, asking if his mind was completely free from all attachments and subtle pride. Kamaka took a deep breath, looking out of his small window at the beautiful lotus pond nearby, and explained that even though he no longer grasped at anything in the world, the faint scent of the ego still remained, just like the scent of a flower that lingers in a wooden box even after the flower has been removed. As he spoke those words with absolute honesty and deep awareness, looking directly into the nature of that subtle scent, the final illusion of a separate self completely dissolved into nothingness, like a drop of morning dew evaporating into the warm air. He suddenly felt a boundless, infinite space open up within his heart, realizing that there was no kamaka left to be sick or to be healed, there was only the pure, radiant, and deathless awareness itself. The elder brothers smiled with deep joy, seeing the radiant clarity that suddenly filled his eyes, knowing that he had reached the ultimate harbor of absolute awakening, where all rivers of suffering finally lose themselves in the vast ocean of total freedom. When you touch this profound level of awakening in your own life, you will notice a beautiful sign, which is the absolute disappearance of the feeling of loneliness, replaced by a permanent, deeply comforting sense of aloneness that is entirely full, rich, and content within itself. Loneliness is the painful feeling of an empty heart that constantly craves the presence, attention, and validation of others to feel complete, always running away from its own shadow. Aloneness, however, is the beautiful state of being completely fulfilled in your own presence, finding an infinite richness in the quiet spaces of life, free from the need for constant outer stimulation. You become your own best friend, your own sweet sanctuary, and whether you are sitting alone in a quiet room or walking through a crowded, noisy marketplace, you carry a beautiful, independent peace that cannot be disturbed by the presence or absence of anyone else. This complete self-fulfillment allows you to connect with other people from a place of absolute abundance rather than neediness, loving them deeply for who they are without demanding anything in return to fill an empty space in your soul. Think of the beautiful life of a female practitioner named Sukha, who chose to live a very simple life in a tiny hut at the edge of a wild forest, spending her days in silent mindfulness and deep contemplation beneath the tall trees. The villagers often looked at her with deep pity, wondering how a person could live all alone in the wilderness without a family, without friends, and without any social activities to pass the time, believing she must be incredibly lonely. One day, a curious woman from the village walked up to her hut, bringing a small basket of fresh fruit, and asked her directly if she ever felt sad or frightened being so completely isolated from society. Sukha looked at her with eyes that were incredibly bright, clear, and full of an ancient, peaceful joy, and replied with a gentle smile that she was never alone because she was always in the company of the beautiful wind, the singing birds, the changing light, and the profound stillness of her own mind. She explained that loneliness only exists when your mind is fighting against the present moment, wishing to be somewhere else with someone else, but when you are fully present, every tree becomes a dear friend and every breath becomes a beautiful conversation. The village woman felt a deep wave of peace wash over her just by listening to those gentle words, realizing that the humble practitioner possessed a true wealth of inner companionship that no human relationship could ever match, demonstrating that an awakened heart is never lonely because it is intimately connected to the very fabric of all life. As this beautiful inner fullness matures within you, another clear sign of your awakening will manifest as a natural, effortless flow of creativity that expresses itself in everything you do, completely free from the fear of criticism or the desire for applause. You begin to see that life itself is a grand, continuous work of art, and that your every action, whether it is arranging a vase of flowers, writing a simple letter, cooking a meal, or organizing your workspace, can be a beautiful expression of your inner clarity. You no longer create things to prove your talent, to compete with others, or to build a grand reputation for yourself. You create simply because it is the natural nature of an open heart to share its beauty, love, and joy with the world. This absolute freedom from the ego allows your creative energy to flow purely, spontaneously, and with an incredible freshness that touches the hearts of everyone who witnesses your creations, inspiring them to connect with their own inner light. There is an inspiring story about an ancient weaver named Tantavada, who lived in a quiet town and was known for making fabrics that were so incredibly beautiful, soft, and full of vibrant colors that people felt a sense of deep peace just by wearing them. He did not use any complex patterns or secret techniques. He simply sat at his wooden loom every morning, breathing smoothly, his mind completely still and clear, infusing every single thread with the pure light of his presence. A proud young artist once came to his workshop, bringing a highly complex tapestry that had taken years of calculated effort to create, wanting to show off his superior skill and challenge the old weaver. Tantavada looked at the young man's work with deep, genuine appreciation, praising the intricate details, but when the young man asked to see the weaver's master plan, Tantavada laughed softly and said he had no plan at all. He explained that he simply allowed the beauty of the morning sky, the scent of the rain, and the peace in his heart to choose the colors and move his hands across the loom, without any thought of winning or losing. The young artist was completely stunned as he looked closely at the weaver's simple fabric, realizing that despite its simplicity, it possessed a living soul and an absolute perfection that his own calculated, ego-driven work could never achieve. He learned that true art is not a product of intense mental manipulation, but a spontaneous blossom of a quiet and awakened mind that simply allows the universal beauty to flow through its hands without any obstruction. This brings us to another beautiful sign of your awakening, which is a profound, natural softening of your boundaries, where you no longer see a rigid division between your own happiness and the happiness of the world around you. When you live in the deep sleep of the ego, your main concern is always your personal comfort, your safety, and the well-being of your small circle of loved ones, viewing the rest of society with a degree of indifference or suspicion. But as the light of awareness completely fills your heart, you begin to see that the suffering of a stranger in the street, the pain of a wounded animal, and the destruction of a beautiful forest are intimately connected to your own being. You feel a spontaneous, powerful urge to reach out and help wherever there is pain, not because you feel a heavy moral obligation to do so, but because you see that helping another is truly the most natural way to care for yourself. Your entire life becomes a beautiful, selfless prayer of action, dedicated to bringing comfort, relief, and peace to every single living being that crosses your path, flowing through the world like a gentle stream that nourishes every plant along its banks. We can see this beautiful truth in a lovely incident involving an ancient elder named Purna, who chose to travel to a distant, rugged region known as Suna, where the people were famous for their fierce tempers, violent behavior, and absolute hostility toward outsiders. Before he left, his teacher asked him how he would respond if the people of Suna insulted him with harsh, cruel words, and Purna replied with absolute calmness that he would think they were very kind because they did not strike him with their hands. The teacher then asked what he would do if they struck him with their hands, and Purna said he would consider them wonderful because they did not hit him with stones or sticks. The teacher continued, asking what if they attacked him with stones and sticks, and Purna replied that he would feel deep gratitude because they did not take his life with a sharp sword. Finally, the teacher asked what if they actually took his life, and Purna looked into his teacher's eyes with a face full of boundless compassion and said he would think they were truly delivering him from this fragile body with great kindness, helping him complete his final sacrifice of love. The teacher was deeply moved, realizing that Purna's heart was completely free from all concepts of personal hurt, fear, and separation, making him perfectly fit to bring peace to the most troubled minds. Purna went to that difficult region, and through his absolute gentleness, his total fearlessness, and his boundless love, he completely transformed the hearts of the violent inhabitants, showing that a person who has truly awakened to the oneness of life can turn the fiercest desert into a beautiful garden of peace. Another wonderful sign of your awakening is a beautiful, intuitive alignment with the natural cycles of life, where you learn to age, change, and let go of things with an absolute grace and a light heart. Most people fight desperately against the passage of time, using all their energy to preserve their youthful appearance, clinging tightly to their past roles, and feeling a deep terror at the natural signs of aging in their bodies. This resistance creates an immense amount of suffering, because change is the most absolute, unshakable law of this universe, and nothing can ever remain the same for even a single fraction of a second. But as you wake up, you see the beautiful wisdom in every season of life, understanding that youth has its own vibrant color, maturity has its deep fragrance, and old age has its beautiful, majestic silence. You allow your hair to turn gray, your skin to wrinkle, and your physical strength to naturally decline without a single trace of regret, seeing these changes as a beautiful process of your soul becoming completely ripe and ready for its ultimate journey. Think of the beautiful example of an ancient laywoman named Visakha, who had lived a long, magnificent life, being blessed with a large family, immense wealth, and a position of great respect in her community. In her youth, she was celebrated for her extraordinary beauty and vitality, but as the decades passed, her body grew frail, her steps became slow, and her vision began to dim beneath the weight of old age. One afternoon, her young granddaughter looked at her wrinkled hands with a touch of sadness, asking if she missed the days when her skin was smooth, her hair was dark, and the entire city praised her youthful radiance. Visakha laughed with a sound that was incredibly warm, gentle, and full of deep contentment, and told her granddaughter that her youth was like a beautiful green leaf in spring, which was lovely to look at, but her old age was like a ripe fruit in autumn, sweet, nourishing, and full of absolute fulfillment. She explained that she would never want to go back to being a young leaf, because she had spent her life gathering the golden seeds of mindfulness, kindness, and deep peace, which could never be destroyed by any number of years. Her granddaughter looked at her face, which was radiating a beautiful, timeless light that far surpassed the superficial charm of youth, realizing that when a person lives with absolute awareness, the passage of time only adds a deeper, more majestic beauty to their soul. As your journey of awakening reaches its complete fulfillment, your daily speech naturally transforms into a profound silence, where even when you are speaking many words to help others, your mind remains in a state of absolute, uninterrupted quietness. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself, to argue about abstract theories, or to use words as a tool to project a specific image of who you are to the world. Your words become very simple, incredibly clear, and filled with a deep, soothing energy that goes straight to the heart of the listener, bringing immediate clarity to their confusion. You find that you love the quiet spaces between the words far more than the sounds themselves, and that your simple, silent presence is often the most powerful, healing message you can ever give to a world that is so incredibly noisy, tired, and full of restless chatter. Consider the inspiring life of an elder named Ajita, who lived in a small cave in the high mountains, spending his time in deep, silent contemplation, looking out over the wide, misty valleys below. He rarely spoke to anyone, and when seekers climbed the steep mountain path to ask him difficult questions about the nature of reality, he would simply sit with them in total, absolute silence for hours, looking at them with eyes full of deep warmth and total acceptance. Many seekers found that as they sat in that profound, sacred silence near the old practitioner, the stormy questions in their own minds naturally began to quiet down, their anxieties melted away, and the answers they were looking for arose spontaneously within their own hearts. They realized that Ajita's deep silence was not an empty absence of speech, but a powerful, living presence of pure awareness that was far more eloquent than any philosophical discourse could ever be. He proved to the world that when a person is truly awake, their entire life becomes a beautiful, silent hymn of peace, a radiant lighthouse that quietly guides all weary travelers through the darkness back to their own inner home of eternal light and absolute freedom.